What is up, everybody? It's Madlibs, and welcome back to Awful OCs, the series where I redesign and redraw my old characters while I tell their cringy and terrible backstories. This is the second episode, and in the first episode I actually ended up getting a lot of comments talking about how it wasn't really that bad, and how I should, redo Code Red, which is, the series that all of these characters are coming from. And honestly, I know that it sounds that way when you only hear one person's backstory, but trust me, give this like 5 episodes and you'll understand why I stopped doing it completely. Because when you have a series where there's like 20 different characters, and they're all the main characters, and every single one of their backstories is just as edgy, complicated, and nonsensical, and you try to smash it all into one thing, it's not worth saving. But now that I've said all that, let's get started on this episode. Now, in the first one, I said that this character, Rose, was what started this whole thing, but I started doing a little more thinking and a little more digging, and that isn't really true. She was the first character that I created that ended up in the series, but the person and the character who, actually got that off the ground, who actually got the plot rolling, wasn't her. It was this guy, Mark. Now, unlike Rose, he doesn't really have too much of a creation backstory where Rose was my self-insert. Mark was just a character I made because I was doodling in biology in like the 7th grade, and I thought, you know what, I should draw a cyborg. And yeah, I ended up with this guy. And he just has the greatest character design. It's not impractical at all. You can see that he's got like half of his face missing, but somehow the rest of his face is fine. It's just that one chunk. He's got an arm that's missing that isn't on the side of his face, so I'm not sure how all that happened. He's got a leg that's missing on the side of his face, and then he's got a little patch, a little panel on his other leg, which he has a hole cut into his pants for, and I don't know why, because that little patch doesn't do anything. It's just there because it has to be there. And then he's got that, thing on his arm. Now, this thing on his arm was actually supposed to flip up and be like a little keyboard, like with holograms, and he could talk to people and send messages, and I didn't realize it until like 2015, he was created in 2012, that there is no possible way he could work that because his hand is missing. How is he supposed to push the buttons? It took me so long to figure that out. Every time I imagined him, hitting the buttons, I just imagined him with a hand without thinking about it, like subconsciously. I only realized this when I tried to draw him doing something with the keyboard because I had never, actually drawn that before, and I drew him with the missing hand, obviously, and I was like, wait a minute. That's not quite right. And yes, that is a bulletproof vest that he's wearing over his t-shirt. And he's wearing some good khaki shorts. Everybody loves those khaki shorts. That's probably because I was in middle school when I created him and every dude was wearing shorts like this, at least the ones I hung out with, because I hung out with the nerds. And he was only supposed to be 15, so I feel like some 15-year-olds are still wearing that. Now, I actually liked this design a lot back then, so I decided I wanted to, do more stuff with this design. So I gave him a name, Mark. And then I gave him a job as a secret spy, because I felt like that's the kind of job he would have. And then I gave him a sister, Hannah. And then I gave them a backstory. And then I gave him a world to live in. And that world was Code Red. Now, if I'm being honest, he's one of the more tame characters from this entire thing. Well, I mean, after I picked one backstory for him. But I didn't make this video so I could focus on redesigning the boring but, okay version of my characters. I made this video so I could redesign the awful, embarrassing, and overly complicated versions of my old characters. And this guy actually has multiple backstories, so we can start with the, okay one and work our way up. Just get more ridiculous as time goes on. So the first backstory, and the one I actually ended up going with, was that he was just a regular kid, He was walking down the street one day, and he got to his house, and all of a sudden his house was hit by a missile! Yeah, that's right, a fucking missile flew out of nowhere and hit his house, and somehow it ended up taking part of his face, his opposite hand, and his opposite leg, and then just little bits of his other arm and his other leg, because that's how missiles work. Oh, and also, no other house was hit by that missile, just his. Like, he lived in a packed suburban neighborhood in my thing, and his house was the only one that was hurt, because that's how missiles work. Obviously, they only hit one tiny area, and nobody outside of it is affected. So, after all that happened, this secret agency rolled up on the house just to investigate. And they were like, hey, this kid's, still alive. Also, his sister was there, because he has a sister. I don't know why she didn't get hurt, but she just didn't. She's just immune to missiles, I guess. And this secret agency is like, oh, dang it. That sucks for them. Let's take him in and, fix him up and just give him a nice place to live. Yeah, that sounds good. Because that's what secret agencies do. They just pick up people that got hit by missiles and give them a home and stuff. And this secret agency was named WPC. Ugh, I hate saying this. the World Protection Corporation, because that's a super cool name, and that's just how they name stuff. And oh my god, why did I do this? Speaking of which, the dynamic that WPC had with the rest of the world was kind of weird. It was some kind of like Tony Stark type situation, you know? Like the whole world knew that they existed and they knew that they protected them, but somehow they didn't know who the agents were, even though like the secret base of WPC was like a giant skyscraper in the middle of the city. Somehow the bad guys could never fucking find it, and I don't know how. And also the villains and like the heroes, like the bad guys and the good guys, they didn't act like bad guys and good guys. They acted like super chill people. Like the villains that killed so many people and blew up cities, they could just walk around and like go get a drink at your local pub. Like no police were involved. Like I didn't even think there were police in my world. It was just WPC. Or maybe there were police and I just never used them because I was like, oh yeah, terrorists, they can just walk into bars and they can order drinks. That was me. That was me when I was 12 because I was stupid. Also, sometimes like the bad guys and the good guys, they just hang out, they just be chill, they just ignore the fact that, you know, they've both killed so many people on the opposite side. They just ignore it. Like this one thing where like everyone was going to a club somehow, even though Mark is 15 and Rose is 13 and Logan is like 14, Butch is the only one, he's 18, he's of age. They all went to a club, and then Randy is there just getting a drink, because that's what evil cyborgs do. This is Randy, by the way, evil cyborg, hi, how you doing? And then they party together. That was the rest of the story. Like, that's not how humans operate. Was I a human when I was 12? Was I human? Am I still human? Or was I ever human? We're going into an existential crisis. Let's move on. Anyway, there was like a plot twist in this story, and the plot twist was that WPC was, you know, the ones who sent the missile that hit Mark's house, but it was like, it went haywire. Like, it didn't mean to hit them, but somehow it hit their house fucking perfectly. And the reason that they ended up taking Mark in the first place was because they felt bad for him. They're like, this is kind of our fault. We should probably fix it. And they blamed it on Sinister, which is the evil organization, because Sinister, get it? They're bad guys. They're sinister people. I was hilarious. And that's why Mark wanted to fight them, because he's like, you killed my parents. Dang it. And yeah, that was the first backstory. Now the second backstory is what I call the Randy one. And if you guys don't know who Randy is, it makes sense because I've never talked about him before until this very video, like a couple minutes back. Randy is like the main bad guy of Sinister. He's an evil version of Mark, like an evil cyborg, you know? The second backstory involving Randy was that after Randy was kicked out of WPC because that was part of his backstory, Mark's parents took him in. And they just kind of took care of him, and then, you know, Mark's dad became kind of like Randy's dad. And then, you know, him and Mark secretly knew each other, because all cyborgs know each other, because back when I was 12, I was a cyborg racist. Not all cyborgs know each other, 12-year-old Libby. God. Also, somehow Mark remembers absolutely none of this, even though Mark was like, you know, 6 or 7 or maybe 8. He was old enough to be able to remember Randy. And Randy's appearance didn't change, like, at all, because he has the same amount of cyborg bits. It's like not before he was a cyborg. He was already a cyborg. And I feel like a child would remember a Robo-Man walking up into their house and being friends with them. Like, Hannah, I understand, because Hannah was like 3 or 4, probably doesn't remember, but like Mark should have remembered. But the only reason he didn't was plot convenience, obviously. So the rest of the backstory pretty much goes exactly the same as, you know, the other one. The missile hits the house and then, you know, it's all destroyed. And I don't remember if Randy was already there when it hit and he didn't really get hurt because he was mostly metal, or if he came back before Mark got home, but, you know, after the missile hit. Either way, one of those happened. And because I was a super extra bitch when I was 12, I had this really dramatic scene where, like, Randy goes up and Mark's mom is like, she's dead, obviously. And then he finds Mark's dad, who's, like, dying, and he goes up and, like, holds him in his arms, and he's like, oh my god, how could this happen? And then Mark's dad is like, it's okay, I'm gonna be fine. And then, like, something falls off of the top of, like, the house, not even the house, like, just rubble breaks off. And Mark's dad pushes Randy out of the way at the last second, and it, like, crushes him. Not all the way, obviously, because if he was crushed all the way, he wouldn't be able to ask with his last dying breaths for Randy to take care of the children. Take care of Mark and Hannah. And then he dies. Actually, this couldn't have been before Mark got there, because Mark got kinda exploded, because that's why he's a cyborg. Duh, I forgot to mention that. But Mark was, like, unconscious during this whole thing, which is why he doesn't remember that part. And then WPC gets there and Randy hides. And then Randy purposely has them go with WPC because he's like, they'll be able to take care of them. And that's why Randy's always going and finding Mark. It's not because he's hunting him or because he's a bad guy, even though he is a bad guy technically. It's because he wants to check on Mark and Hannah and make sure that they're doing okay and that he's fulfilling the promise he made to Mark's father. By the way, I just want to mention, I made a comic about Mark finding out that he knew Randy. Like, Randy gives him a picture and it's like all of them together. And Mark's reaction to this was quote for quote, "Holy dookie, what the butt." Cause I thought it was just so funny and lol random XD when I wrote that. It wasn't. It's just terrible to look back on now. But let's move on. So this last backstory, it's the worst one out of all of them. And I'm actually going to move on to the current story because this last backstory was supposed to be like a huge twist, and I want it to be a huge twist for you guys so you can get the full magnitude of just how shocking and how well thought out it was. You guys will hear it eventually, but we're going to go on to the current story for now, and then you'll hear it, a little later. So, in the current story, after, everything happened to him, he joins WPC, and he becomes a secret agent. And as I told you, he has a sister. Her name is Hannah, and she's 8 years old. Now, his relationship with his sister was supposed to be like a nice, wholesome thing. Like, he protects her because they don't have parents, and he takes care of her, and she doesn't really understand a lot of the seriousness that comes with the secret spy life, She wants to be an agent, and he doesn't want her to because it's dangerous, and, he just wants to protect her, and, they're adorable and all that good stuff. Not much actually happens in his story. He meets, the other character, Rose, while he's on a mission, and they don't get along, and then she runs away, but then she gets recruited, and then they have to be partners, like every other buddy cop movie in existence. But then they get partnered with another guy with the name I don't know why I kept, Butch. And they all go on crazy adventures where they do goofy things and serious things with spies and ghosts and time travel and clowns. And while all this is going on, he starts to fall in love. It used to be with Rose because I thought like, oh, boy protagonist, girl protagonist, they're 2 years apart, they gotta fall in love. That's how it works. And I kind of shipped him with Butch too, because I went through that phase that every insufferable nerd girl goes through where everything gay is like, oh, it's so cute because they're 2 guys, gayness, and it's like borderline on fetishizing, and it's really gross, and I'm glad that I got over it. But I ended up changing it to falling in love with Rose's sister after I gave Rose a different love interest. Another thing about this in my little comic thing was that everybody had to have a love interest. There was nobody at the end of my series that was happily, single, or just didn't have a boyfriend or girlfriend at the end. Because I wanted them all to have someone they could get married to when I did the whole Where Are They Now thing when the comic ended, and how I wanted to make my second generation series about their kids, which I'll probably move on to after I'm done discussing all the characters from this series. So they take care of all that, and they go on a huge life-changing adventure in the middle of all this, in the midst of it, and they find out that this whole time, Hannah was the villain. Yep, Hannah, the 8-year-old, was the villain this whole time. Now, the backstory for this plot twist was that Mark's parents were actually the owners of Sinister, and they, injected Mark and Hannah with these, serum things, and they gave one to Mark so that he would be super buff, even though he's not even buff in my comic. And then they gave one to Hannah that would make her super smart, so that when they died, they would team up, and they would own Sinister and get all of WPC out. And that's why WPC actually sent the missile to them. In that version of the story, the missile didn't go haywire, they sent it to them because, that was where the leaders lived. They just lived in this nice, quiet suburban town because that's where the leaders of, terrorist organizations live, obviously. And that's also why they took in Mark and Hannah, because they were like, nope, Sinister doesn't get to have the next heir to Sinister. They don't get to have the next leaders or whatever. We're taking them. But they didn't suspect that Hannah had a secret serum. So this whole time, Hannah was secretly gathering information from them and being like a double agent, even though she technically wasn't even an agent in the first place. Because apparently 8-year-olds can run amok in this agency and just get secrets. Also, Hannah had magical hair. She had some tentacle Medusa hair, and I'm really, really sad that I don't have any drawings of it because that was a huge point in the story. The whole point of it was, yeah, Hannah has this amulet and this armor where she can grab stuff with her magic hair. She was also working with a demon, aka Shadow. They were just working together the whole time. I mean, obviously. And then there was a part where Mark shoots her, but she doesn't die or, like, get shot. She just goes flying back once the laser hits her like it's a fucking episode of Looney Tunes, flying through the air. And then she gets arrested, and there's a Silence of the Lambs reference, and the world moves on. And I actually have no idea what happens to her after that, because she is never addressed again. Like, she disappears completely, and everybody gets their happy ending in the comic ends, and she's just gone. Like, you know, out of sight, out of mind. That's how bad guys work. And, yeah, that's Mark's story. And here's his new design. I'm actually really proud of how this whole thing turned out. As you can see, I gave him a different set of clothes because I really don't think that a secret agency would be letting him walk around in a t-shirt and khaki pants. I gave him some regular pants, I gave him like a dress shirt, and I gave him some kind of like cool identifying jacket, because blue was the color of WPC, red was the color of Sinister in the story. And if I'm being honest, I'm getting some serious Detroit Become Human vibes from this. I feel like it's because I've been playing that game non-stop for a little while, so, you know, it leaked in. I changed his little, you know, cannon arm so it doesn't look like a tin can. It looks like an actual cannon and it has a laser coming out of it. I kept, you know, his leg, but I tried to keep everything, like, generally on the same side, because if, you know, he got caught in an explosion, you know, it wouldn't go haywire all over the place. So I kept most of his cyborg bits on the right side. And I also didn't think that he'd be walking around with his, like, robo faceplates just hanging out, so I gave him a little Phantom of the Opera type mask to cover up that part of him. And I was gonna draw his other leg, you know, both of his legs, that's just completely robot, but the pants covered up most of it. Made his hair a little shorter, just other small things like that. But yeah, there he is, the new and improved Mark. And I don't know his backstory because I'm not going to go that deep into it. But maybe you guys have a backstory. If you guys want to give him a backstory, you know, write it in the comments. Tell me what it is. Tell me what is going on. I want to know, because he doesn't have a backstory. He doesn't have anything, because I'm not going to use him for anything. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys like this. Don't forget to like, comment, and definitely don't forget to subscribe and join the madness. See ya!